Good evening and what's going on, Guardians? My name is the Black Link, and today it is Thursday once again, and you know what that means. It is finally time for the Bungie Weekly Blog, This Week at Bungie, for the week of May 24th, 2018. Warmind is a couple of weeks strong, we're still having some fun grinding it out, and we've got a brand new patch coming into the game next week that's going to be bringing even more stuff for you to seek. And hopefully we'll be learning a bit more about that in this week's TWAB, although you might not be learning exactly about the thing you may want to hear about. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive on in. Now, of course, this week we had Iron Banner, and they start things off by talking a bit about Iron Banner, how it's 6v6, how we've got some new armor ornaments and whatnot to earn right now. But the first big section I kind of wanted to talk about is titled Hive Annihilation. And as you can no doubt guess, it talks a bit about the Escalation Protocol. We get some of Bungie's design goals for the Escalation Protocol, and we get to hear about some certain issues like matchmaking and difficulty within the in-game game mode from Bungie lead designer Jacob Benton. Here's what they had to say. Escalation Protocol was designed to be a high difficulty in-game activity for a max level 3-player fireteam. Other players in the world can contribute to make it easier, but they shouldn't be required as long as your team is highly skilled and coordinated. We have received a lot of feedback since the original launch of Destiny 2 that players felt like reaching max power was not satisfying. There weren't enough activities that required and rewarded that level of commitment. Escalation Protocol was designed to fill that gap. And right there, I'm going to stop and say, I call shenanigans. Escalation Protocol was designed for 3 max light players, and maybe not, having played through level 1 at least up to level 7. I haven't been able to complete level 7 even with 9 people, all 360 and above. Some of us in the early to late 370s not being able to complete this. There was a fire team that was able to complete it, 3-man, all of Escalation Protocol this week from Glad. You guys might know him. He's an incredibly talented Destiny player. I mean, we're talking the absolute top tier of the top tier of PvE guys, and he and a group of 2 other max power level Guardians were able to 3-man Escalation Protocol, all 7 ranks, in 8 hours of play. Yeah, 8 hours of play, and at the end of it, the strategy they had to go with was basically all 3 of them sitting back with Darcy, sniping down the boss, and then rushing in with supers to finish them off before running out of time. After 8 hours of playing Escalation Protocol, that's kind of what they had to do to beat the final level. Just that, given how difficult it is, I'm not exactly sure that this is really balanced towards a 3-person fire team, but I guess that's an issue for another video. Anyways, continuing on, Jacob had this to say. So, this activity was not specifically designed for 9 players. Other than raid activities, all PvE activities in private spaces are optimized for 3 players to allow for multiple types of activities in the space. So no, it wasn't designed for it, but it's not a surprise that it's easier with 9 players, given how underleveled most of us are right now. We knew that players would use the same creative workarounds to get 9 players into a space similar to Court of Oryx, but we did not specifically tune the difficulty around requiring that many players. And so, finally, are there any plans to enable larger fire teams in the future? We've had a lot of conversations here about what to do to answer the community's feedback. We're going to continue to monitor as more players progress up to max power and are able to attempt Escalation Protocol at the difficulty it was designed for, and will determine what, if any, action is necessary. We also hear players are really enjoying large groups of players fighting against enemies, so we'll use that feedback to inform our future plans. So basically, no, nothing's changing right now. If you're somebody who was hoping that Bungie would respond and maybe put in some sort of matchmaking system or allow full fire team sizes to go into this patrol space, kind of like you can do with private games, it looks like that's not happening right now. Now, like I said, this is actually going to be kind of a greater complaint I should make its own video for, but I don't know if I believe this right here. It certainly doesn't feel to me, and again, I'm only in the 370s when it comes to my highest power, but it certainly doesn't feel to me like this was an activity designed around 3 people, a 3-person fire team. I certainly love the difficulty of Escalation Protocol, and it's an absolute blast when you get, 8 other people in there, so you can have a 9 stack just running up against those bosses. But I really don't see how the average fire team of 3 is really going to be able to tackle this sort of thing. And given the fact that they supposedly made Escalation Protocol super difficult in response to player feedback at the community summit a month or so ago, If you're unhappy with Escalation Protocol in its current form, this actually might be one that you can lay at the feet of us content creators. Sorry about that. But alright, let's move on. We've got some armor updates to talk about because, of course, next week we're getting update 1.2.1 and it's going to have our first round of exotic armor sandbox changes. And we get to hear directly from Bungie sandbox designer Victor Anderson about what we're going to be seeing next week. We do know that these sandbox changes are going to be coming in sort of a 1-2 punch with the update next week and then an update later on in the summer. So we're going to be seeing a few changes to a few exotics. Here they are. First up for Titans, we've got the Syntheseps. Here are the changes for it. Previously, the perk adjusted your melee damage depending on the number of enemies surrounding you. Now it grants a flat bonus to melee and super damage when you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies. The buff is retained for a short duration after you're no longer surrounded. Meaning you're no longer going to be getting a scaling buff based on the number of enemies around you. It's just going to be a flat thing. When you have 3 or more enemies around you, you get a big boost to your melee damage. To hopefully make it a little bit easier to utilize and keep track of in both PvE and PvP. Next up, we've got the Lion Ramparts. Now, you can hipfire while lift is active without interrupting it. And your aerial hipfire doesn't have an aerial accuracy penalty. This is awesome. This means you can kind of mid-air strafe with the Lion Ramparts while firing, and you're not going to be getting hit with that mid-air accuracy that, in my opinion, really kind of doesn't need to be there in the first place. This change could actually make the Lion Ramparts pretty useful for strafing with high accuracy weapons like hand cannons in PvP, or even certainly something like submachine guns when you're baiting people around corners and through doors and you're jumping above their heads. Definitely a very interesting change, one that's perfectly tailored for emphasizing fast-moving aerial assaults. And also, you'll have to forgive me, I always call them the Lion Ramparts when they're the Lion Rampants. Slip of the tongue. Alright, next up we've got the changes coming to Hunter gear. First up, the Dragon Shadow. Do you remember this Hunter exotic? Well, now with its special ability, dodging will reload all of your weapons simultaneously. The effects of the Wraith Metal Mail ability now also include a bonus to mobility. If you'll remember, the Wraith Metal Mail perk previously granted you increased movement and weapon handling speed for a short time after dodging, so now you're going to be getting that plus the ability to reload all of your weapons simultaneously. Not too bad of a change at all. This is going to make it a much more useful subclass neutral exotic to run with. Alright, after that we've got some changes to the Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves, and these are actually kind of big. Now, swapping to a sidearm while critically wounded greatly increases its damage. Ooh man, I likes me the sound of that. Based on how big the damage increase is, this could of course pair perfectly with something like the Sturm and Drawn combination, where you have to get that sidearm energy weapon kill with the Drawn before you can get the power up with the Sturm. They state that they wanted to go for a fantasy of a holdout weapon, the pistol tucked in your sleeve that you pull out in an emergency to save yourself. And I'd say this change definitely lines right up with that. Alright, moving on from the pleb classes on to the Warlock Master Race. And believe me, I know some of you, the non-enlightened ones out there are pretty upset with that statement. You're about to join the Master Race too, because boom! Luna Faction Boots, baby! Getting the change that I have wanted them to have for oh so long! With this update, activating a rift on the Luna Faction Boots will reload your weapons automatically instead of being activated on entry and exit. Also, empowering rift will make weapons more effective at extended ranges. You might remember right now Luna Faction Boots, they reload your weapons but you have to step out of the rift and then back into the rift, and it's kind of hard to tell when you're out and back in sometimes, and to do that when you're, dropping damage on something like Callus. Now you're not going to have to move. You can just stand in the rift, whether it's healing, whether it's empowering, and get your ammo back. Boom! This is absolutely going to change the way DPS phases go. And I cannot wait to try it out. The icing on the cake, of course, is now that Empowering Rift is also going to increase your weapon's effective range, giving you even more incentive to run Empowering Rift over the safety of the Healing Rift and the Overshield that you can get for standing in that. Not a bad change at all. And then finally, we have got the Sun Bracers. Oh, those wonderful exotic gauntlets. Their original effect has been replaced with this. They now increase the duration of solar grenades, and solar melee kills grant unlimited solar grenade energy for a brief time. That's right, getting solar melee kills with these gauntlets on will now grant you unlimited solar grenade energy for a brief time, kind of bringing back the sort of power you had as a Sunsinger back in Destiny 1, where you would pop your radiance and suddenly you had grenade charges for days. Very interesting change on here. I kind of wish they would have given us the timer for that, because of course you're getting unlimited solar grenade energy for a brief time there. So we really don't know if it's going to last for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or what, but I do know that I like the sound of having more grenades to toss. I'd say that's a pretty good roundup of changes coming for all three classes, and I can't wait to see how some of the other exotic armors are going to be changing in the patches that are going to come out later this summer. But alright Guardians, that is pretty much it for the biggest bits of news to come out of this Week at Bungie for the week of May 24th, 2018. We've got some big changes in the pipeline and a very exciting summer calendar to look forward to. And of course, this patch is going into effect next week on May 29th. So mark your calendars, tune in, and get ready to experience some of the new wonders of Destiny 2. Now before we get out of here, I will say one thing. I was a little bit disappointed we didn't hear anything about Crucible Labs within this week's TWAB. Of course, we know that it's supposed to be launching next week with the 1.2.1 update, so I was really hoping we'd hear some of that within the blog update for this week, but I guess it just wasn't in the cards. Maybe we'll get our own article for it, maybe we'll get some information for it next week. Who knows? All we do know is that when we do, we will be posting that information right here on the channel, so make sure you're staying tuned, and be sure to leave us your thoughts about all of this down in the comment section below. How do you feel about Escalation Protocol? Do you really believe it's been tailor-made for a fireteam of 3? Be sure to let us know. But alright, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed, feel free to drop a like, make sure you subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest Destiny 2 news. But alright, I'm out for now. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, I'm the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.